Hello there, it's Tania Gabrielle, Wealth Astro-Numerologist. Welcome to Star Codes. This is the forecast we look at an upcoming event in the stars and numbers, the astrology and numerology, to help us navigate the energy in the best way possible. And today we're going to do something a little differently because the end of April, the last 11 days or so, are really very instrumental in helping to create the shift that's ongoing and really in play this year. In fact, over this year, we're commemorating dates that hold memory from 250 years ago, and I'll go into that in a moment. Memory is stored in our geography, in the land that we live on or come from. It's stored in dates, in time, and memory is also stored in astrological and numerological configurations. Now remember, we just had the solar new moon eclipse in Aries on March 29th. It was at 9 degrees Aries, and remember that 9 degrees lines up with the number 9 universal year of 2025. So it triggered a triple nine, sun, moon at 9 degrees in the first sign, and 9 universal year for 2025 as well. 9 is the final single digit, and 1 is the first single digit. So we have this juxtaposition of things coming to an end and new things beginning in that eclipse. And then the next day, Neptune moved from the final sign of Pisces, the sign that it rules, into the first sign of Aries, literally hours later. So that was a pivotal moment. It really launched a series of events that are now unfolding. And remember that Neptune takes a long time to move through each sign, around 14 years. So Neptune entered Pisces, its own final sign, in 2011, and then recently moved into Aries. So we have endings and new beginnings, and late Pisces and early Aries being stimulated around the clock in the numbers and stars over these few months. And that doesn't even take into account all the other slow moving outer planets, all of them moving to 0 degrees of new signs, starting with Pluto back in November 2024. Then we just had Neptune move from Pisces to Aries. Next we have Saturn from Pisces to Aries as well. This hasn't happened in 12,000 years that both of them enter Aries and conjunct each other in the first sign at 0 degrees. That's coming up the end of May. And then we have Jupiter in June and Uranus in July. So those are all the 5 slow-moving planets moving to new signs within a few months. Again, there's no record in astrology from what I'm aware of where you can even look back and create a memory that actually shows, well, the last time we had this happen, the Earth was undergoing these changes. Well, there is no record of this event. So the pivotal energies of the time we live in are extraordinary. And keep in mind, just 12 and a half years ago was when we had the Mayan calendar end a 26,000 year cycle and begin a new one. And then just literally at the equinox in March, we had a Kali Yuga cycle end. And that's the Yuga cycle is also a 26,000 year cycle. So we have so much new beginnings, endings, energy. And then now we have these other more recent events in history that are being triggered through the astrology. So we can have memory stored in the earth, in time, in dates, in astrological configurations. They're also stored in the DNA, in our genes. They're stored at soul level, spiritually. So now we're being stimulated in the second half of the 2020s to reactivate some of these moments in time. It's as if we're looping around and coming back to do things differently because of all these additional configurations that are going on this time around as opposed to 250 years ago. We have so much more that's helping us to progress and uplift the energy now. So let me start with, first of all, a date that's coming up, and that's April 19th. And that was 250 years ago that the American Revolutionary War began. And then the Neptune cycle, which lasts about 164 years or so for Neptune to orbit around the sun. If you subtract 164 from 2025, you get 1861. So the last time that Neptune entered 0 degrees Aries was in 1861. That was the beginning of the Civil War. And also, we have Uranus entering Gemini, as I mentioned, in July. And Gemini is the sign that Uranus is in the US natal chart. So it's coming around to make what's called a Uranus return, a planetary return. And that happens every 84 years. And we personally have an 84-year return around our age at 84. And so we personally experience that as well. So for a country to experience it is important because you can look back. With a human being, you can't really look back, what happened 84 years ago. Well, I was born, so not much history there, not much memory. But with a country you can, and with the US, the last 2 times, because there's only been 2 other times that we've had the return, was in 1861 and then in the 1940s. So this will only be the 3rd time since 1776. And guess what? It happens 250 years after the US actually was born. So next year, in 2026, is the 250th anniversary of the US. So you can see there are these 250-year cycles now, and they're not just impacting this country, they're impacting everyone, because the Neptune cycle impacts everyone. The planets going to 0 degrees impacts everyone, right? All of these are for every person on Earth. It's just that for the US, there was a lot of new beginnings energy and old energy that was purged, new beginnings energy that was born. So, like I said, now we've come to a time where we have a lot of other help to usher in new energy. So, to summarize, Uranus was in the sign of Gemini during the period of the Revolutionary War, the founding of the US. 84 years later, Uranus returned back to Gemini around the period that coincides with the Civil War. That is also when Neptune entered Aries for the last time before now in 2025. And then Uranus returned back to Gemini during the 1940s, which coincided with America's involvement in World War II, and also coincided with the very early period of sort of like pre-Cold War from 1945 to 1949, which is when Uranus left Gemini. This was when the US was the only nuclear superpower. Less than 2 months after Uranus left Gemini and moved into Cancer in 1949, that's when the Soviet Union tested their first nuclear bomb, and suddenly the Cold War got more complex, right? And there's a lot more that happened during that time with general superpower energies. So what we're facing today is resurfacing many subjects. This is the memory part of the astrology. Many subjects that are related to probably most of the topics that were activated in those periods. So first of all, with the birth of the US and the freedom movement there, the extrication, the liberation movement, that is very much activated now because Pluto moved into Aquarius, and Aquarius is the sign of freedom. In fact, Uranus rules Aquarius. Uranus is the planet of freedom and revolution. And then regarding the first Uranus return, internally in 1861, the beginning of the Civil War, the US had tremendous division between North and South, and that division is absolutely part of what has been going on the last few years in the US. It's been more divided than ever. So these are really central to the news cycles of today, these topics, and they had their origin from past periods when Uranus was in Gemini, and also when we had Neptune move into Aries. This is a very big shift that happened, like I said, hours after the big Aries eclipse on March 29th. On March 30th, Neptune moved into Aries. So Neptune is connected to water and the oceans, Mars to fire. Both are very cleansing energies. Water absolutely is there for healing, for washing away, for purification. Fire like incense is an example of burning something so that it can get reborn, right? So rising from the ashes, the phoenix rising from the ashes. So there's a real sense of when Neptune moves into Aries of a very powerful shift going on with these two very different elements. And now we have an opportunity in many ways to get into a much more high vibrational state. So we can work with Uranus in Gemini coming up and work with Neptune in Aries and also Saturn in Aries, which is coming up, right? Pluto in Aquarius and Jupiter in Cancer, which is really the fortunate moment that happens in June. I haven't talked about yet, but Jupiter is exalted in Cancer. That means it loves Cancer. That is also going to be very helpful. So now I want to circle back to Mars because Mars enters Leo on April 19th. And Mars in Leo, that's another fire sign. Mars is a fire planet, is a very powerful placement. Leo is the sign of royalty. And on the 20th, just a day later, the Sun squares Mars. So Mars in Leo is very happy there. Mars in Cancer, where spent so much time. Mars is in its fall. It's not that happy there. So now it's moved into Leo where it just can really focus on forward momentum and just being fired up, being very passionate. The Sun squares Mars a day later on April 20th, and it does stimulate you to act, but you really need to guard around that time and this whole time against overheated passion, being argumentative, being aggressive, being reactive, impatient, impulsive. And then we have another square, literally 3 days later on the 23rd. And that is when the Sun squares Pluto. Because once Mars enters Leo, Mars will be at 0 degrees Leo. Pluto will be at 3 degrees Aquarius. They will be opposite each other at that moment by sign. Leo is opposite Aquarius. And that's a very powerful opposition. And it will come more and more into play as we move into the end of April and early May. So then on the 20th, the Sun squares Mars. On the 23rd, the Sun squares Pluto. It's really a T-square that's created. And that Pluto square Sun is because it involves Mars as well, is about a rebirth. And it's very much about surrendering to God, to set yourself free, to relax into a new way of being, and to learn about power and disempowerment and channel the intensity of that moment into something that's really, really worthwhile to you, because you're going to reap a lot of great rewards if you do that. So be sure to breathe this whole time. I really mean like mid-April onwards, like breathe and let go and let bygones be bygones and meditate. On the 26th, we have Mars opposite Pluto. That's when it is exact. And this is such a powerful opposition. These are the co-rulers of Scorpio. Mars is the ancient ruler, Pluto, the modern ruler. And Scorpio is aligned with life, death, rebirth, transformation, energy. It's a passionate sign. It's a sign of secrets. It's a sign of having the courage and confidence to look at what is unseen and confront it and accept it. And there's a lot of inner tension with an opposition, and it needs to be channeled, especially between these two passionate planets, Pluto and Mars, that are co-ruler Scorpio. You need to channel that passion into something physical, like do creative projects. Either way, you have the courage now, you have the confidence to move forward. You feel very magnetic and passionate. And then comes the new moon in Taurus a day later. So all of these aspects between these planets of Sun and now also Moon, Mars and Pluto are activated during that Taurus new moon. And that happens on the 27th of April at 7 degrees Taurus. And I will create a separate forecast for that. But the moon will be square to Mars. The Sun will be square to Mars. The moon will be square Pluto. The Sun will be square Pluto. And Mars will be opposite Pluto. There's an incredible T-square that's created. So yeah, we're going to have a tremendous, I would say 11, 12 days at the end, well, mid-April to the end of April, where things are being made over massively. And that's in addition to the outer planets changing signs during this period as well, right? Where Mars is the trigger, Uranus is the revolutionary, the revolter, Neptune the creator, the planet of dreams, creating new dreams. In Aries, the new sign. Remember that Neptune and Saturn are both entering Aries within a few weeks of each other, and that hasn't happened in 12,000 years. This is huge. This is really major. I mean, that's before the Ice Age. So this is like no other year. Everything is changing. And with these changes, you are changing. So please pay attention. I'm sure you are, but don't judge yourself for whatever you feel is shifting within you, that it's surprising you, because that inner shift is absolutely normal around this time. In fact, it is not only unprecedented, but it is absolutely vital that you shift within, that you shed the chains of burdens and hang-ups and things you're holding on to for security, like shedding that and just being open and relaxed. And in order to feel that, you have to feel that you are connecting to something in your life that inspires you, that you have people in your life, and that you have surroundings that you live in as well that are inspiring. So if you are, for example, allergic to noise and you want a quieter location, this is important to really pay attention to because of these changes. Vice versa too, if you are somebody who loves being in the hustle and bustle and the arts and the creativity and the stimulation of a city, you may want to also consider that shift. Now, it's really important if you are considering traveling or moving to know what parts of the world and parts of your country and state are good for you. Even within your community, there are good places to go and difficult places to shop and walk and exercise. This is all based on astrocartography, which can go from the minutia to the grandest, meaning you can look at big areas and very small areas. And I have a free masterclass at positivelocations.com that tells you all about it. So go to positivelocations.com, watch that free masterclass. It's instant access, and you'll learn about the secret power of place, how your astrology birth chart is superimposed on the world map, the critical components of astrocartography that impact your career, your relationships, your abundance, your health, your family, your friends. We have numerous celebrity astrocartography examples for you, and a common mistake that you might be making if you're going online to check your lines, because there's a lot you're missing out on, and that really makes a huge difference if you're choosing where to travel or where to move to. And then also we're looking at the relocated chart as well, which is a vital piece of your profile before choosing where to move and where to travel. So enjoy that free masterclass at positivelocations.com, and I will see you again next week. Have a beautiful week and lots of love.